parents should have a say in which apps are right for their teens. That's why Instagram wants to work with Congress to require parental approval wherever teens under 16 download apps. Learn more at instagram.com/parental approval.
At Mayo Clinic in Florida, we're conquering the unconquerable, using data and AI to create personalized gene roadmaps to fight cancer more effectively. Learn more at mayoclinic.org/possible. Mayo Clinic, you know where to go.
To get the Crime Writers on After Show right now, go to patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is Crime Writers On. Crime Writers On is the original true crime review podcast that digs into true crime, pop culture, other podcasts, and on this episode, it seemed like a miracle weight loss drug, but it was killing people. How are people getting their hands on a substance supposedly banned for human consumption? We'll review the podcast One Click from C13 Originals. Joining me to get that done and more is true crime author, TV journalist, and host of the These Are Their Stories podcast, my husband, Kevin Flynn. Hello, Kevin.
Becca, I got to get to one of these championship baseball games to umpire.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, we've got, the minors. We got the fourth graders, and then it gets really intense when you get up to the sixth graders. And I'm practicing all my ejection moves. It's rough.
Okay, also with us is private investigator, certified pet detective, resident cat lady, and author of Dead on Deadline, Laura Bricker. Hello, Laura.
Good evening, Rebecca.
And finally, our resident Doubting Thomas, author of the City Trilogy of novels, host of the Strange Arrivals podcast, and our Patreon Deep Dive Book Club podcast host, Toby Ball. Hello, Toby.
Hello, Rebecca.
So, Kevin, what is coming up on Monday's podcast?
Oh, we're going to be talking about the podcast Fiasco, the AIDS crisis.
Oh, wow. Leon Neyfakh.
A Leon Neyfakh production.
Our old friend, Leon. All right. So, Laura, I hear that you won a major award this week.
A major award?
What happened?
Was it a leg lamp?
Yes. Oh, it was a leg lamp. Oh, my gosh. That would not have surprised me as much as this award. So I was at my son's school graduation, like I go every year. The school is very close community. We always go to the graduation. I always put together a little press release for them. So I'm sitting there typing doot on my computer, like I always am. And they're giving out the parent award, which always goes to a senior parent. And surprise, for the first time ever, it did not go to a senior parent. There was two recipients this year, myself and another mother, Meredith. And it was like breaking, tradition in the school. I almost tipped over. I was quite surprised because they call the children up to like hand out bouquets. And I'm like, okay, they're handing out flowers to some senior parent. And they're like, Laura Bricker. And I'm like, just kidding. But they weren't. And it was just so nice. I'm so happy to support the school, but it was something that I was totally not expecting. And then one of the teachers gave me a little shit. And he said,
he gave
I don't
you
know
a
what
what?
He gave me a little shit, one of the teachers. And he said,
oh, well, you just got flat. I thought he actually literally gave you a little shit.
I'm sorry. I thought we were doing the Warren Jeffs voice again. But Heavenly Father. And he's like, what are we going to do now? You were supposed to get this when your son's a senior. Apparently, we're going to have to make a statue for you now.
Nice.
So
wow.
Stay tuned.
I bet you all the senior parents were pissed.
Yes.
I'm sure they were.
You all suck so bad. We're skipping over you.
Yes.
To a freshman parent.
Wow.
It's like it would be like a senior sports awards where like a junior got like
Yeah.
So it's like when a sophomore gets the Heisman, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was like a whole thing. And I was like, okay. Alrighty then.
That's wonderful. You're
congratulations.
That's how wonderful a parent you are.
I try.
All right. Well, congratulations, Laura. And Kevin, we have a lot to talk about with our review, so I think we should get to it. What do you think?
I'm all behind you, Rebecca.
I really don't want to take away from Laura's glory too much, but I'm going to go ahead and drop that first clip right now.
Okay.
Over to him. And he was he wasn't looking right at all. He was kind of like, had marks all over him and stuff, and like lines of black and blue, and he looked like he was bloated. I knew he was dead.
Authorities were stumped by the untimely deaths of people who had been taking a little-known diet drug. Known as DNP, the chemical helped users shed pounds, all while cooking them alive from the inside.
So many intelligent young people have taken this and they've either become seriously ill or, in many cases, they've killed themselves.
But the compound, which was developed as a World War I explosive, had long been banned for human consumption. How was it turning up on the internet? Why did those with body dysmorphia want it? And why were authorities slow to take action despite the pleas from families of the victims?
Some listeners may be intrigued, may Google DNP, and may believe that they can take it safely. We implore you, don't do it. DNP is a poison that can kill you fast. There's no antidote for it, and the death is unimaginably painful. So why are you still able to buy it?
The C13 original podcast, One Click, is co-hosted by actress Elle Fanning and journalist Jessica Wapner. They dive into the rise of DNP deaths while also exploring the historical pressures on body image that likely fueled victims' desperation to take a risky drug in the name of beauty. Spoiler alert, we are going to be talking about plot points from One Click. So if you want to remain spoiler-free, go to the estimated time code in our show notes for our thumbs up or thumbs down reviews. Kevin, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Why is Elle Fanning on this podcast?
Oh, that is a good question. I do believe that part of this, some of the social issues that brought up are something that she advocates about, and I think she might have something to do on the back end of that.
Maybe. Maybe she has something to do with the production company that's going to turn this into like a thing. Isn't it really just that? To be cynical, Jessica Wapner is a well-known journalist, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Isn't it just that they thought a celebrity would make more people listen to this podcast?
Yeah, you can, I guess, make that argument. If you're going to compare Elle Fanning's performance to Donnie Wahlberg's in Very Scary People, for example, I'd say that Elle's presence does have some meaning, as her interest in, this feminist issue, the political issue. I guess it's a coin flip whether she's needed, because we understand that it's Jessica that's doing, the legwork, that's doing the reporting on it. And when it's Jessica narrating, it's fine. Maybe the way to say it is that Elle's presence and her narration doesn't take away from the series, doesn't really feel like a stunt to me. I actually think she does a pretty good job, as the narrator. And to have them both go back and forth, I think it's fine. Could it have just been Jessica? Could it have just been Elle?
Yes.
Yeah.
And yes. That being said, they didn't use her well. She had one little story about going to ballet class and being self-conscious, but if you're going to use her, right?
In ballet class, there came a time where I was no longer comfortable wearing just a leotard and tights. I had become self-conscious of my widening hips, so I added a skirt. And I remember wishing so much to be one of the girls with more slender hips who didn't need to hide themselves.
Yes, and that was my thing. And they're just I'm involved in this podcast and you're going to find out why. And then I'm like,
why?
Okay. I didn't really find out why. I feel like that was a bit of a bait and switch, but you're trying to raise awareness about diet culture and the dangers of diet culture. And you have somebody that is sort of an icon to a demographic that is probably more vulnerable to diet culture than some of us. And I think you had an opportunity there to, even if she didn't have a personal story, let's just make her personal story a little more interesting as to why she's involved in this podcast, to perhaps influence some of the people listening to this that might be listening to it because of her, to perhaps shift some of the thinking and the dialogue and the societal sort of influences around this issue.
I totally agree.
And I just didn't feel like I ever got something that was oh, that's why she's involved. It was more well, I thought I might do a podcast.
I totally agree. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me, it was the Molly Bloom podcast we listened to.
Torch.
Right. Yeah. So Molly Bloom podcast was it was Molly Bloom doing stuff. And I feel like a trick that they used Molly Bloom, but then they actually used her, right? They could have used obviously Jessica Wapner did the reporting, but they could have used Elle Fanning in some way. Had her do something other than just read rap text. You know what I mean? And even if the rap text was better, instead of having her say things like, society says we have to be thin. Like there's more that you could have done with
Who
that.
is Society, and do I know him?
Am I Society? Anyway.
My sense was that this whole podcast was aimed at a slightly different demographic than most of the podcasts we review are. And I thought her being involved in that was mostly to appeal to a different demographic, to have people who don't normally listen to this kind of podcast, like listen to it because she was on it. Like that was the best I could do, because quite honestly, I lost track of like which one of them was talking, which I think is kind of credit to the reporter for being able to, do that kind of narration as well as a professional actress.
But then why did we need Elle Fanning if Jessica Wapner is so good at this? Like,
again, I think it's just to attract a different population who, if it's Jessica Wapner, would be like, okay, whatever. But when it's Elle Fanning, it's like, oh, well, maybe I'll check this out.
Yeah. I mean, Jessica Wapner, by the way, I've booked Jessica Wapner myself on things that I've produced. Like, she's great. She's a well-known reporter. Kevin, I have one question for you.
Yeah.
Were you concerned as you were listening to this? I will just say I was. This drug is terrifying and it kills people. That this podcast might also get people who are desperate about losing weight to perhaps look up this drug and maybe try to obtain it.
Oh, yeah. The lure is really powerful, isn't it? I mean...
They keep saying it works.
Oh, they keep saying it works. Look, this is maybe...
By the way, it's not the podcast's fault. Like,
no, I was going to say, it's probably less about the podcast than it is about how our brains work and how, as humans, this is appealing. The idea of get rich quick, get thin quick, It's the same thing. It's a little bit like suicidal ideation that when you start talking about it, sort of that call of the void kind of thing where you wouldn't have thought about it before, but now it kind of gets stuck in your head. I mean, I was like, well, why don't they just like use half the dosage? And then, I might try that. And it is such a powerful lure. And I will tell you that I don't have body dysmorphia, but I can imagine that for those who do, to hear this, they're nodding along about, yeah, that's really bad. And, if they're like me, then they're like also thinking, but... well, I don't know. It does.
What if I took a quarter of a pill?
Yeah, it's too bad because, boy, that really works. I would imagine that it's very difficult, for them to listen to this and not be tempted to find out more.
There was one character one of the victims in the story, Carla, who was described as the daughter of the woman who ended up becoming the Crusader. And, she was a very athletic person. And then she started taking a medication that made her gain a bunch of weight. And she went from being like a, 100 whatever pound person to like she gained 100 pounds. Very similar to my own situation where you like feel crazy. You don't know what's wrong with you. And that's why she went on the drug. Like, I relate to that. No one can help you. It's not you. And like, you're just doing what you used to do and whatever. I strongly relate to that. And I can't tell you for sure that if somebody like in my very, very highest moment of desperation had said to me, hey, there's this thing that if you do it wrong has a small chance of killing you, but it super works if you don't do it wrong. I can't 100% tell you that I may not have been like, oh, maybe. I don't know. I mean, I'm just
tell me more.
What if they told you it was used as an explosive in
World War I?
Well, there's
that. That's the thing. I'm not saying I would have. I'm saying I would have had that thought.
You understand the way that works.
I'm saying
in your brain.
I understand the way that it works. And I'm saying that this is now like, a thing that's in my mind, which means that when I listen to this, I'm like, are we also sharing it? Laura, but this thing is like the drug is horrifying, right?
It is horrifying. And I'll get to that. But it reminds me of like, right after college, I had a roommate who was always doing like some fad diet. And she went through this like hydroxycut phase.
Oh, God.
And I was like, and she's like, hydroxycut. And she was doing all this stuff. And I was like, that's not good for you. And she's like, no, it's great. And so when I'm listening to this, I can relate to it in that I know people that have struggled with body image and wanting to fit this stereotype of what they feel like they should look like. But I want to say, then when I listen to this is like a freaking Stephen King horror show.
Yes.
Like, you are being burned from the inside out, like cooked from the inside out. Like, there is actually a Stephen King Slimmer or Slender or whatever that one is.
Thinner.
The person keeps getting littler and littler.
Slenderer.
Whatever it is. I don't know. But I'm just saying, listening to this is like, you hear about this and you hear that it's like the heat and that this chemical, like you were saying, that was once used in like World War I era explosives. Now it's sold online as a diet drug, and it basically turns your body into a freaking furnace.
I have never seen any kind of death similar to this one in the over 15 years I've been a nurse. The temperature rise continuing after death is something I'll never forget.
It is absolutely freaking horrific. It just signals the point to which, as a society, we have all been so sucked into this vision of what we think we should look like that we will do anything, including being a fucking furnace even after we die. I mean, I'm like, oh, okay, so if you happen to die while you're out in the wilderness with your friends, oh, great, they can like huddle around you like a little campfire. That's
Jesus,
fucking
Laura.
disturbing. And the fact that people are still taking this, and like all you have to do is Google this shit and you're going to see what happens and how it's like illegal in the UK and people are still getting it. But no, I think we have to get to like the root of why we feel like this is an option.
Parents should have a say in which apps are right for their teens. That's why Instagram wants to work with Congress to require parental approval wherever teens under 16 download apps. Learn more at instagram.com/parental approval.
Start your wellness journey at Whole Foods Market, where it's Jumpstart January through the 16th. Stock up on supplements with some of the year's biggest savings. Plus, save on air-chilled organic boneless skinless chicken breasts, organic Honeycrisp apples, organic large Hass avocados, and more. And since Whole Foods Market is the only certified organic national grocer, it's easy to make them your wellness destination. Jumpstart your January now at Whole Foods Market.
At Mayo Clinic in Florida, we're conquering the unconquerable. Using artificial intelligence and data, our experts can create a personalized gene roadmap just for you, customizing your cancer treatment, giving your body exactly what it needs to fight the disease. We're making more possible at Mayo Clinic, because every day we're doing what's never been done. Learn more at mayoclinic.org/possible. Mayo Clinic. You know where to go.
All right, Kevin, I think it's time for you to do that thing that our dogs do and do your business.
Oh my God. That is so unappealing.
Yeah, but it's time. I should like walk in a circle and do some business. It's time for our business section.
Yeah, so if you join us on Patreon, go to patreon.com/partners in crime media.
That's the address.
You can get almost 300 exclusive podcasts, including the Crime Writers on After Show, Toby Ball's Deep Dive Book Club podcast, Leave It to Bricker, and the latest episode of Married with Podcast, where Rebecca and I give out advice. On this episode, we answer a question from Ellen. She has one son who just had a baby and one son who he and his wife just lost one, and she's looking for a way for emotional balance.
It's really hard.
Very hard question there, but this is what we deal with on Married with Podcast. We should say, even if you're not on Patreon, we'd love for you to join our Facebook group for Married with Podcast. It's called Married with Podcast.
Let's
discuss. We'll let you in. You can ask your own question, or you can give advice to the people who are throwing questions there. It's a really great
Some of them
forum.
are intense. Some of them are absurd.
Some of them are absurd, yes.
Yeah.
Also want to let you know that we've got the newest episode of These Are the Stories are out. This time we're looking at a classic Law & Order episode from the Mothership, Season 12, Episode 1, Who Let the Dogs Out?
Yes, with a great guest.
Our great guest is comedian Brandy Brown. A woman is mauled by a mad dog in Central Park.
Yep.
And Briscoe and Green try to track down what happened.
Murderous dog.
That murderous dog, yes.
All right, so Kevin, before we wrap up this business section, do we have any Patreon patron saints of the week this week?
Our Patreon patron saints are Amanda Perino and Suzanne Soretta.
Suzanne Soretta, one of our favorite people.
Yes, Suzanne is going through her challenges, and we are standing right beside her. She's one of our favorite folks. Suzanne is our accent guru. You'll remember she came on and tried to teach us all that Philadelphia accent from Mayor of Easttown.
Yes, Pittsburgh.
Don't put water in my dirter.
Where she's doing her audition. I don't know. It was really tough.
That was it. It was the audition.
The audition.
Yes.
Water. Look, she's great. She's one of our favorites.
Trying to solve murder.
She's trying to solve
in the dirter.
So good luck, Suzanne, and your handsome fiance, Olivier.
Philadelphia.
Which Rebecca is going to try
her fiance, Olivier.
I know.
He is gorgeous.
The only one she'll ever leave me for is Olivier. So anyway, patron saints, and we love Amanda too. Just we haven't known you as long as
Amanda,
Suzanne.
until we hang out with you in person and have a drink with you like we have with Suzanne, you'll always be wonderful. But Suzanne, we've clinked glasses with Suzanne.
Yeah, so that might happen. Who knows? So I forgot to say this. Bless you.
Bless you. Anyway, thanks for supporting us on Patreon, as always, and thanks for supporting our business section. And Kevin, does thus end it?
Thus ends the business section.
I'm going to go ahead and fade that music out right now. So, Toby, let's talk about the DNP itself. How do you feel about that chemical, the fact that people are putting it in their bodies, the history of it, and just how it came to be a thing that one would seek and consume?
I think it sucks. First of all, I might have missed it. Do they talk about how many people actually do this or how big the trade is in this?
I don't think it's known. I mean,
it
right?
wasn't really clear, nor was it clear as far as how many fatalities.
Yeah, so I just didn't know. I didn't have much of a sense of what the scope of this is and whether this was in and of itself was some kind of scourge or whether this was like a stand-in for like a larger group of dangerous sort of diet drugs that people use or, exactly where we're going with this. So that was one thing. To me, this seemed like a 4-episode podcast, right? I kind of felt like the first episode was interesting, kind of gets you, orients you to what's going on, gives you some stories that are pretty compelling about people who are using it. And then episodes 5 to 7, where again, we're kind of getting back to this sort of, what's the story with DNP? Here are some things that happened. Here are the reactions to it. This is kind of what's been trying to be done. And then the rest of it seemed to me to be going over stuff that I felt like I've had kind of like exposure to again and again and again and again. Things about like the changing idea of what is beauty within society, how that changes from, society to society and from different eras within societies. There is stuff about how the internet isn't good for people who have body dysmorphia or other problems with the way they look or insecurities. There's stuff about how it's hard to regulate the internet and like you can't control what you find and all this stuff. So anyway, I felt like all that stuff seemed a lot like padding and was stuff that I'd heard of before in sort of more compelling ways. And I kind of felt like it detracted from what was otherwise a pretty interesting and horrifying story. And they target this one guy who's been selling it. And I don't know if he knew at the time how dangerous it was. I assume that he did, but it seems as though he didn't connect the human toll with his actions. And I feel like, it's always easy to be like, oh, I'm so sorry. I wish I could take your pain when it's afterwards. But in this case, it did seem to me, and maybe I'm a sucker, but that he was genuinely hadn't really put together 2 + 2, sort of the effects of what his actions would be. So anyway, I kind of felt there was just way more in this than I needed to know. And I think they could have really sort of shaved it down and had kind of a tight, short podcast that would have been pretty compelling all the way through.
Yeah, Toby, you brought up the question about sort of the scope of it. And on the other end, I was like, okay, well, there are, fatalities associated with this, but I didn't really get a sense that, other than I don't know how many were involved in that court case. I mean, fewer than half a dozen, right? Unless I'm wrong.
Yeah. It
doesn't seem like, compared to other pharmaceuticals,
you're not helping with the people not looking this up on the internet situation.
Let me finish. See, I don't think that's the point, though. I don't think that it needs to be like you have to have as many deaths as opioids.
Yeah.
Or you have to compare this to how many people have adverse reactions to their own birth control or something, right? I think that the point is just that this shouldn't even be here, right?
Yes,
You're not talking about pharmaceuticals that get misused or that aren't completely understood or whatever.
You're putting a thing in your body that can explode.
That is
literally.
Yeah, that is banned for human consumption, or as one of the episodes says, banned from human consumption.
Literally, you could put this, and it literally could explode when it's in the mail on the way to you.
Yeah.
Remember that? That was the whole thing where like they have to ship it wet so it won't explode.
Yeah.
And then like some people were drying it out in their ovens.
Try it out in an oven.
Yeah,
that's a good idea.
Sometimes when you put things that are explodable in an oven, they can explode.
Yeah.
Try them out and heat them up.
Just put them in the microwave. It'll be fine.
This is like a freaking episode of Breaking Bad. Like they're going to be like getting this stuff in like an RV in the desert in the next episode.
Laura, you sent me a funny note, a weird note about the website's constantly changing. You were scammed by a website that was constantly changing at one point in your life?
I was. Yeah. So at one point, one of my friends, Susan, called me and she's like, Laura, oh my God, the Keen Factory outlet is having a sale.
The shoes?
And you need to, yes. And she's like, and you need to go online and get the Keen shoes. And I was like, oh my God, I love the Keen shoes. And like, I went on before I even researched it because she was like, Laura, no, my brother who's in the military sent it to me. It's legit. You need to go on now. It's going to be done soon. You need to go on the Keen outlet. And so I went on and I like ordered some Keen shoes. And then I was like, something seems a little weird at the end. And then I was like, shit. And then, surprise, I never got my Keen shoes. So I went online and I looked and the website had been like shut down and changed. But I ended up like screenshotting a bunch of stuff and I went to the cops and I was all fired up and the cops came out and they're like, here she comes again, Laura Bricker. And I was like, no,
Here she comes again.
Yeah.
I'm like, you got to shut this shit down. It's fraud because my credit card wouldn't refund me because they said, well, no, you willingly bought it. I said, yes, but it was a fake website. And they're like, tough shit. We're not going to refund you the money. So I went to the cops and they said, oh my gosh, like basically like this happens all the time with companies setting up fake websites that are like one numeral or letter off from the actual website.
Yeah, they're not companies doing it, Laura.
Yeah.
They're scammers.
Yes.
They were like, it happens all the time. We send it to the FBI. They're the ones who have jurisdiction, but they are super busy because so many of these come their way and there's like basically no way they can keep up.
Yeah. I'm sorry you got scammed, Laura, but at least you didn't put an explosive in your body.
I didn't, and I lost like $100, which in the grand scheme of life wasn't that much, but I was so fired up for months. I was like fighting the credit card company. I was like, it's a scam. And they're like, no, you charged it willingly. And I'm like, but it's fake.
Well, that's why you should have an American Express because they would take the company down for you. So, Kevin, one thing that you pointed out to me, which I thought was interesting and I didn't think a lot about, was the fact that this podcast focused so much on men.
Not so much, but that it actually included men.
No, but it did. It focused actually a lot on men, which is something that I didn't think a lot about. And, you pointed out to me that made a difference for you.
I think if you were to say, hey, we're going to do a podcast that touches on diet culture and, the quest to obtain beauty, that you would suspect that a lot of it is going to be focused on women. And it obviously was, but it also brought in this segment of men who also suffer from body dysmorphia. And you typically don't think of that, or at least I hadn't. And the idea that, bodybuilders, predominantly men, not all of them, there are bodybuilders out there, bigorexia, which was a term I hadn't heard, and the way that they are using diet pills to melt away the fat so that the muscles look more sharp, that kind of thing.
I didn't know much about it. This guy literally was probably 15% body fat, couldn't see one ab on him. I saw him at the gym 2 days after he started taking DNP, and he had a shredded six-pack.
And also just men who are large can also have body dysmorphia. They want to look thinner. And I just thought, sometimes it is important to identify something as a woman's problem, quote-unquote woman's problem, because sometimes it's empowering to women to claim it like that. But also sometimes there are advantages to demonstrating that it's an all-gender problem, right?
Yeah.
It takes away because sometimes it's a woman's problem.
We didn't recognize an eating disorder in our own family because it was a boy. And he's like, he'd be very comfortable with us telling you, one of our own kids had an eating disorder in high school. And he's like, why didn't you guys notice it? I was super skinny and I was fainting all the time. And it's like, oh yeah, because you were a boy. That's why we didn't notice it.
Yeah.
It's embarrassing, but it's true. I actually like that about the podcast too. And I love the roommate's testimonial about sort of how he created the fake Facebook accounts to compliment his own body online, which is classic eating disorder behavior, right?
Right. But I will also point out that in the history of DNP, the way it comes back is not through cosmetics and fad diet stuff. It comes back to the bodybuilding community, where you get two bad dudes who meet in prison, of course, and then concoct this idea to bring the DNP back in. And once people in one community finds out like how great it is, obviously other people are gonna find out.
Yeah. So, Laura, one quick question. Speaking of body dysmorphia and eating disorders, were you surprised to hear about the thriving culture of pro-anorexia forums and eating disorder online culture that still exists and is really thriving on the internet? I mean, I know I've seen it, Instagram, Reddit, all of the online culture around eating disorders that, I mean, honestly, it's real. And I will say, if anyone thinks this is fringe, if you are participating in something like fasting, if you're participating in something like what you think is clean eating and you've got a forum around it, if you're participating in something like some sort of program which seems mainstream to you, you are also participating in one of these. I don't want to shame you, but I just want you to think about it. I mean, it's really not that different.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I thought that I was somewhat aware and educated around like anorexia and bulimia. I knew people in college. I had people living in the place that I lived in college who had eating disorders. But I think what really sort of threw me for a loop in listening to this part about anorexia was the way that it was described as like the personality, the goddess, like we do this for her and she says this and she says that. And like, I was like, oh, like that was like a whole nother level that I didn't realize existed, and sort of assigning almost a human goddess-like quality to the idea of subscribing to an anorexic lifestyle and starving yourself in a way that kind of personified it and glamorized it.
Should I be in such a weakened state and I should cave, I will feel guilty and punish myself accordingly, for I have failed her. I will devote myself to Anna. She will be with me wherever I go, keeping me in line.
It was pretty enlightening, and boy, there's a long road ahead to change the culture that has contributed to this becoming so just ingrained in our society that is, I mean, God, I know. I mean, when I had the COVID and I was sitting around on social media every day, all day, I was watching a lot of stupid shit online. And when I finally got back out, like some of my friends like, my God, you look like good. And I was like, well, I was watching like makeup videos on Instagram. Like I learned how to do my makeup in like a different way. And it was kind of funny. And they were all like, ha ha ha, like Bricker learned how to do her makeup. How funny. But I'm thinking as I'm listening to this podcast, like there's other people that are on Instagram all day that are doing things that are a lot more damaging to their psyche and their health and their mental health than just like learning, oh, hey, you can put your like complexion cream on with a brush, which,
Yeah.
I found it educational. I also found it like sad to listen to the lengths to which that is just part of the marketing that is out there.
I'll just say one thing is that a lot of, I mean, this is definitely also sort of relegated to like teenagedom. Like this is a thing about body dysmorphia and like that culture. And it's sort of like teenage girls, young girls. I will say this is very much a part of adult culture as well. It just has different.
The first victim we hear was 47.
Yeah, it has very different packaging in adult culture. The diet culture game in adult packaging, though, is branded in a way that is incredibly acceptable. And right now, the big diet thing that is in the world is fasting. Intermittent fasting is the diet thing. And there are challenges around intermittent fasting online. It's like the 2-day, 3-day, the 1-day, 5-day. And there are forums about it, and there are Reddit discussions about it, and there are Twitter threads about it. And it is touted as an acceptable, healthy, human way of being that is considered to be not an eating disorder. It is starvation. It is, you are not eating. And if that is different than an eating disorder in some way, It isn't. It just isn't. And I encourage, by the way, anybody listening to this podcast right now who wants to challenge me on this, subscribe to a podcast called Maintenance Phase, hosted by Michael Hobbs. It will change your life. It has changed my life as somebody who has struggled with weight and didn't think I had eating disorders my whole life, and realized now that I do, and I'm now at a very comfortable place in my life with my weight and my health. Subscribe to Maintenance Phase. It will change your life. I'm not going to preach anymore on that. Toby, you agree with me. Maintenance Phase, great podcast, right?
Yeah, I was actually gonna mention that when we summed up at the end. It covers some of the stuff that gets kind of touched on here
in a smart way.
Yeah, it's smart. It's insightful. They choose really interesting topics. It can be funny.
Yeah, it basically makes you realize that any plan is an eating disorder.
Well, it is. And I have to tell you, there's a new, I have a new office mate in the office next to me at the headquarters of Laura Bricker. And it's a women's health practice. And the nurse practitioner there, what I really loved when I went over and chatted with her and got to know her when they had their little open house, is that she was doing something that I think more doctors are doing. It's called Health at Every Size. And it's saying, like, when you go to the doctor and they're like, oh, your BMI is like 28. You're
BMI
morbidly
is bullshit,
obese.
as you learn on Maintenance Phase.
And yeah, and she's like, you know what? Hey, I don't tell you, hey, you need to lose weight. Hey, you need to go on a diet. She said, because 95% of diets fail. And as a medical professional, why would you knowingly tell your patient to do something you know is going to fail? So she's like, we look at like actual markers of your health and not like this whole BMI nonsense and like how much do you weigh and like all that stuff. It's like, how are you feeling? Can you walk down the street? Can you do this? Can you do that? And so I was sort of encouraged to see that some medical professionals are changing how they coach people and interact with their patients around this topic. And you know what I mean? Because like I remember going to my doctor and he'd be like, well, this is what the BMI. And I'm like, you know what? Whatever. I think it helps normalize healthy eating and healthy lifestyle when you have a medical professional that's going to be like, yeah, no, dieting is freaking nonsense in terms of what we were trained to think of as dieting.
Yeah, there are two questions I think were left unanswered. And did they ever mention, these retailers who are selling the pills online? Did they ever get to who's manufacturing this?
Nope.
And where they're getting the chemicals from?
Nope.
Because that's another way of choking off the supply is to, find out, what labs are mixing this stuff together. And the second question, well, I don't know if it's really much of a question, but I kind of wonder, and this is just going to be supposition, that in these cases where people died, if you're talking about people with an illness who it makes them think that I am never skinny enough and I might have just dropped 20 pounds, but I still want to go 20 more or whatever, the idea that they would take just one pill a day, if that was the dosage, that someone might not go, okay, I got to take 2, they would compulsively start playing with that as well, I think is very dangerous. And it might be a contributing factor to those particular deaths. Impossible to say. One of the things seems to be that the guy who was making the capsules, wasn't uniformity in the dosage. So
yeah, and he was also telling you can take as many as you want. It helps you feel better.
Take as many as you want. Yeah.
That phone call with Jessica Wapner.
Oh, that was fucking
makes you
crazy.
Relaxed. Helps you feel super relaxed.
Can you tell me anything about how it works?
It releases your stress. When you're stressed, it releases stress from your body. It makes you stop thinking of everything. It makes you feel good.
Parents should have a say in which apps are right for their teens. That's why Instagram wants to work with Congress to require parental approval wherever teens under 16 download apps. Learn more at instagram.com/parental approval.
Start your wellness journey at Whole Foods Market, where it's Jumpstart January through the 16th. Stock up on supplements with some of the year's biggest savings. Plus, save on air-chilled organic boneless skinless chicken breasts, organic Honeycrisp apples, organic large Hass avocados, and more. And since Whole Foods Market is the only certified organic national grocer, it's easy to make them your wellness destination. Jumpstart your January now at Whole Foods Market.
At Mayo Clinic in Florida, we're conquering the unconquerable, using data and AI to create personalized gene roadmaps to fight cancer more effectively. Learn more at mayoclinic.org/possible. Mayo Clinic, you know where to go.
All right, well, let's do what we do. Let's let our listeners know, should they check out One Click, the podcast from C13. It's about the diet pill DNP that literally cooks you from the inside. Laura Bricker, what do you think? Thumbs up or thumbs down for this podcast?
I'm going to go thumbs sideways on this podcast. I feel like this is something that people should know about. I feel like there's a lot that needs to be done in terms of changing the dialogue, in terms of how we talk about healthy eating and weight and diet culture. But this podcast was just too long for me in terms of what the message was that they were trying to get across. And it just like lost me in the middle. And I feel like there was a lot of good information that if this has been condensed into like 4 episodes instead of however many episodes I listened to, it would have been much more effective in terms of getting the message across. There was nothing like inherently wrong with this podcast. It was just slow. It got bogged down. And I think it would have benefited from just packaging it in a little bit different way in terms of how and when the information was presented, because it's fucking horrifying, this drug. It's like something out of a horror movie. And the fact that people are still trying to get their hot little hands on this, oh God, that was a horrible expression for this particular drug, but is horrifying. So I want to see awareness out there. I want the word to get out about how dangerous this is. But I don't think a lot of people are going to stick it through all of these episodes to hear all that information. So thumb sideways for me.
Toby Ball.
Yeah, I don't have a clear sense of, is there a plague of the DNP or is it just like a few people use it? I never get a sense of the scope of the problem. Anyway, yeah, I'm a thumbs down. I thought there was some interesting stuff in here. But, really, I think it could have been a good 2 or 3 episode podcast and, been pretty tight and pretty interesting and kind of made the points it needed to make. There's a lot of time spent on things that I feel like I've gotten lots and lots of other places, generally in ways that were more compelling, about like changing ideas of what's beauty and, the dangers of the internet for people who have self-esteem or body dysmorphia issues, and so on and so on and so on. So yeah, it just felt very padded, which is too bad because I thought the parts that were good were pretty good, but there was just too much other stuff. So I'm a thumbs down.
Kevin Flynn.
I'm going thumbs sideways. I agree with a lot of what Toby is saying, but I don't want to give it a thumbs down. I thought Elle Fanning did a really great job as the co-host, and I thought that Jessica's reporting and her narration as well was very good. We start getting into things like, I think it's, I'm going to start rolling my eyes. Well, we're going to touch the history, and we're going to talk about the societal issues. But each of those I thought was done really well, and I was still interested as they went through that. Sort of after coming back to sort of all that side stuff, the history, when they finally got back in the back end of the series, talking about the prosecutions and the victims and stuff, that felt really padded and went on kind of too long, too many episodes to tell too little new information. And so I kind of lost it there. So I think that structurally it could have been better, but I thought the information was good. But again, I really didn't get a sense of the scope of the problem, although one death from, DNP is too many.
Yeah, I'm thumbs down on the podcast, thumbs up on the reporting. So I'm thumbs down on the podcast, right? It could have been a good podcast if they had just taken Jessica Wapner's reporting and made a podcast out of it. That was like Toby said, 3 or 4 episodes. We make a podcast where I work called Document that does like reporting projects that can be 2, 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 episodes. Like they think about Uncover from the CBC, which is like however many episodes it takes. It could be 5, it could be 4, it could be 6, or Reveal from PRX. The fact that this had to be a certain length to fulfill whatever it had to fulfill, an ad deal, whatever, although there were no ads in this, is what it suffered from, right? The fact that I had to hear a hearing and then an episode about victim impact statements, I was like, dear God, like a lot of padding. Not that the victim impact statements weren't important, but that should not have been 2 episodes. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it was a poorly structured, poorly laid out, interesting story, if that makes sense. Reporting was interesting, podcast poorly done. So even though it sounded good a few times. So anyway, yeah, I'm thumbs down on this podcast, even though I found some of the information really interesting. All right, that's going to do it for us. But before we go, Laura Bricker, Do we have a cat of the week this week?
Our cat of the week comes to us from Christine Schott. And I love this one because it was like short and sweet. And I think it summed up the epitome of what a Crime Writers On cat of the week should be. My cat Figgy is 3 years old. I adopted her during the first year of the pandemic. She has traveled with me by car between DC and Louisiana 3 or 4 times now.
Wow.
When I'm listening to CWO and CWO recommendations, she is keeping an eye out for the fuzz.
Unbelievable. A cat that can travel in a car.
It is hysterical. It like sits on the back of this car. It's like sprawled out, like looking for the popos.
My colleague is about to take a move to Montreal for like 6 weeks, and she's bringing her cat. And I'm like, your cat's going to move with you? And she's like, whether she likes it or not. And that is a journey, as you know, putting a cat in the car. All right, Laura Bricker. Obviously, folks can email us their cats of the weeks at crimewriterson@gmail.com. But if they want to tweet them to you, how can they find you on Twitter?
They can find me at Laura Bricker.
And Toby Ball, if folks want to tweet to you to talk about, I don't know, just about anything, but maybe like UFOs, how can they find you on Twitter?
At Toby Ball NH.
Kevin Flynn, what about you?
I'm at Kevin P. Flynn.
And if you want to follow me on Twitter or Instagram, find me at Reb Lavoie. Follow the show on Twitter at Crime Writers On, and please join our incredible community at our official Crime Writers On Facebook group. Support the show at patreon.com/Partners in Crime Media. You will not regret it. We have like 200 episodes of content back there. Our theme song was composed and performed by Ty Gibbons. Our line editor is the incredible and wonderful Olivia Burdett. The executive producer of this program is Kevin Flynn.
That's me.
This show was recorded in the Yoga Loft above the Bodega in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi studio, otherwise known as Studio C, the closet in our New Hampshire basement where Elle Fanning comes out to read half of our scripts as well. On behalf of all the crime writers, thanks so much for listening. We will catch you later.
I don't want to interrupt Toby and let him get back to his point, but I have a question about that part of it. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Way to go with the
We've
flow,
been doing this for years together.
Okay.
Partners in Crime Media.
At Mayo Clinic in Florida, we're conquering the unconquerable, using data and AI to create personalized gene roadmaps to fight cancer more effectively. Learn more at mayoclinic.org/possible. Mayo Clinic, you know where to go.